Imagine finding out that the house you just bought for like $500,000 was actually sitting unwanted on the market for 4 months longer than you were told. I mean, in the world of real estate, the price tag isn't really a fact, right? It's more of a strategic illusion.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Mm.
trying to read a poker player's face, but the poker player is an entire industry. What you're seeing online when you browse is, well, it's almost never the full story.
Right. And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive, because today we are pulling back the curtain on the real estate market to reveal the hidden data, the psychological traps, and those pricing tricks that really define how properties are actually bought and sold.
And we have some incredible sources to unpack here. I mean, we're talking a really rigorous MIT study
Mm.
on housing data, professional real estate photography guidelines, and advice from property managers and insurance experts.
Oh, and don't forget the rogue data scraper built by a Reddit user. That one is wild. We're going to look at how they uncovered some deeply hidden Zillow metrics.
Yeah, that Reddit tool is a game changer.
Totally. So by the end of this deep dive, you, our listener, are going to look at a standard real estate listing with basically matrix vision. You'll be able to see the desperation, the hidden flaws, and honestly, the genuine bargains that are hiding right in plain sight.
You'll never look at an open house the same way again.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. Every real estate transaction starts with a listing, right? It's the digital front window. But according to our sources, sellers are just constantly sabotaging their own sales right out of the gate.
Oh, the visual sabotage is staggering, especially when you consider how much money is on the line. I mean, looking at guidelines from professional editing services, bad photos actively ruin perceived value.
How bad could it be, just like a blurry photo?
Well, worse. A major culprit is harsh HDR processing. High dynamic range is supposed to balance the light in a room,
Hmm.
but amateur photographers crank it up way too high.
Oh, I've seen those. They look almost cartoonish.
Exactly. It creates these unnatural glowing halos around the edges of furniture and walls, and it completely flattens the shadows. And the human eye relies on shadows to understand the depth of a room. So removing them makes the space look small, fake, and honestly just oddly hostile.
Hostile, wow. And I'm guessing it doesn't stop at the lighting?
Not at all. The next major visual sabotage is window masking, where the windows just look like these blown-out glowing white squares.
Right, where you can't see outside at all.
Yeah, and if a buyer can't see the view out the window, their brain immediately fills in the blank with the absolute worst-case scenario. They just assume you're hiding a brick wall or like an alleyway garbage can or a busy highway.
That makes so much sense. People naturally assume you're hiding something.
Always. Then there's simple clutter and misalignment. A photographer might not lever their tripod, which results in crooked camera lines. It makes rooms look awkwardly shaped, like the house is physically tilted.
Like a fun house? That's a huge red flag.
And leaving personal items out, like family photos or mail on the counter, that creates a psychological barrier. It forces the buyer to feel like an intruder in someone else's home, rather than letting them, project themselves into the space.
They can't picture their own stuff there.
Exactly. Furthermore, lacking a 3D digital twin of the home, like a Matterport tour where a buyer can click and virtually walk through the hallways, that makes a static listing feel instantly outdated nowadays.
Yeah, people want that interactive experience now. But the visual element is really just the bait, right? Because when buyers actually start reading the listing description, the sabotage gets even worse.
Oh, absolutely. There's this fascinating Dallas-Fort Worth study that breaks down how specific words literally cost sellers thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I saw this in the notes. Using the phrase motivated seller in a listing description actually results in a 4% lower sales price. Wait, if I'm a buyer, seeing a motivated seller sounds like a green light for a deal. Why does it result in the house sitting on the market 15% longer? Isn't that totally counterintuitive?
You would think so, but you have to look at the psychology of the retail buyer. To them, motivated seller doesn't signal a great opportunity. It signals desperation.
Oh, so they smell blood in the water.
Basically, it broadcasts that other people have already toured this house and passed on it, which makes the new buyer wonder, what did everyone else see that I'm missing?
Ah, so they assume there's a hidden catch.
Right. It shifts the buyer's mindset completely. They go from being excited about finding a dream home to being like highly suspicious detectives looking for the hidden flaw.
So essentially, buyers are penalizing honesty. And the study shows this applies to other words, too. The moment you admit you fixed a flaw, buyers assume the rest of the house is just a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, it's wild. Words like goodbye, vacant, and even repairs Actively lower the sale price.
So if you fix the roof, you shouldn't say it was repaired. What do you say?
You should say it was updated. Repaired makes people think the house has a history of breaking down, right? But updated makes them think it's modern and turnkey. Precision in language really dictates the buyer's internal narrative.
That's such a subtle shift, but it makes a huge difference. What about vacant? I would think a vacant house is a good thing you can move right in.
A seller might think they're advertising immediate move-in, but to a savvy buyer, vacant signals that the seller has already moved out. And that usually means the seller's paying two mortgages simultaneously and bleeding cash every month.
Oh, wow. So it tells the buyer that the seller is highly vulnerable to a lowball offer.
Exactly. Even saying good location paradoxically signals insecurity about the area. I mean, if it's truly a good location, the map shows that. Pointing it out makes buyers wonder what negative neighborhood feature you're trying to distract them from.
So according to the data, what actually works?
Emotion-laden descriptions focusing on lifestyle. Instead of just listing drywall and square footage, you use phrases like, imagine yourself as the next caretaker of this charming home.
So sellers are basically repelling buyers with bad photos and desperate words. The house just sits. And when a house sits, sellers panic, which triggers the next phase of the real estate game, the cover-up.
The days on market manipulation.
Yes, specifically the days on market, or DOM.
DOM is arguably the most important metric a buyer looks at, which makes it the metric sellers are most desperate to hide. Once a house has been sitting for too long, it develops this massive stigma.
And this brings us to that source we mentioned earlier, the Reddit user on the Rebubble community. They essentially built a rogue data scraper to pull the information that platforms and real estate agents try to bury.
Yeah, and this wasn't just like looking at the screen. The script pinged the back-end API database to see the original creation dates of the listings. It completely bypassed those shiny just listed badges.
Which is brilliant. And this tool uncovered a massive shadow market. Properties labeled as brand new that were actually relisted after sitting untouched for 4 months.
Hidden price cuts too, masked by creating entirely new listing IDs.
Yeah, and properties with over 200 saves from users but zero actual offers. But that's anecdotal data from Reddit, right?
It is, but it's backed up by some incredibly rigorous academic research from the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy. They found a perfect natural experiment to illustrate what happens when you strip away that manipulation.
I really want to lay out how this MIT study worked because the methodology is just brilliant. So in 2006, the Massachusetts Multiple Listing Service, the MLS, they changed their rules.
Right. They forced the days on market metric to be an accurate cumulative total.
Yeah. If you took your house off the market because it wasn't selling and then relisted it the next day to make it look fresh, the clock didn't reset to zero anymore. The days carried over.
But right across the border, the Rhode Island MLS kept the old rule. In Rhode Island, you could still reset your days on market to zero just by taking it down and putting it back up.
So the researchers looked at identical homes in identical markets, separated only by an invisible state line. What did they find?
The results for the homes, caught right in the middle of this policy change, were devastating. Massachusetts homes that suddenly displayed an accurate above-average days on market suffered an average drop in sale price of $16,000 to $32,000 compared to their identical Rhode Island counterparts.
Wow. Up to 32 grand just because the true DOM was exposed.
Yeah, the moment the market saw the true history of the home, the perceived value just plummeted. The truth literally cost sellers tens of thousands of dollars.
But wait, here's where it gets really interesting. If the market suddenly had perfect information, shouldn't buyers have also paid a premium for the listings that were actually brand new?
That's exactly what the researchers expected.
Right, because if Massachusetts buyers now knew for a fact a house was genuinely fresh to the market, shouldn't they have rewarded that honesty with higher offers?
They expected a symmetrical effect. Bad listings punished, good listings rewarded. But the authentically fresh listings only got a microscopic, totally statistically insignificant price bump.
Wait, why? That doesn't make sense.
To figure out why, the researchers conducted direct mail surveys with recent home buyers. It turns out about a third of the buyers didn't even know sellers had been manipulating the days on market in the first place.
Oh my gosh, they had no idea the game was rigged.
Exactly. Because they were completely oblivious to the manipulation before the rule change, they didn't realize the new accurate data was suddenly more trustworthy.
So they punished the stale homes because the high DOM looked bad, but they didn't reward the fresh homes because they assumed the data had always been accurate.
Precisely. The buyers were operating in the dark. But the sellers definitely weren't. Knowing they couldn't hide slow sales anymore, most Massachusetts sellers adapted by lowering their initial listing prices.
Makes sense. They needed to ensure the house sold quickly before that permanent dom clock crept up and ruined their leverage.
But the study revealed a fascinating counterstrategy. In towns where price histories were highly searchable online and where reputable brokers operated, sellers did the exact opposite. They actually raised their asking prices to artificially high levels.
Wait, what? If you are terrified of your house sitting on the market, raising the price seems like a guaranteed way to make sure it sits there even longer.
It does. It's a behavioral strategy called signal dampening. It changes why the buyer thinks it's sitting there.
Okay, unpack that. How does that work?
Well, the sellers hoped that if the house sat on the market for 3 months, buyers would look at the history and think, oh, there's nothing structurally wrong with this house. The seller's just asking way too much money.
Oh. They were using a sky-high price tag as a scapegoat for a slow sale.
Exactly. It deflects the buyer's suspicion away from the physical quality of the home and places the blame entirely on the seller's greed.
That is incredibly manipulative. Which brings us to the root cause of all this anxiety, the psychological death spiral of overpricing.
Oh, it really is a death spiral.
Hmm.
Because overpricing a home doesn't just make it sell slower, it triggers a catastrophic chain reaction in the buyer's brain.
Right. And it begins instantly with the digital first impression, what the industry calls the scroll past effect.
Yeah. Today's buyers use very strict online price filters on apps like Zillow or Redfin. If a buyer's maximum budget is $500,000 and a seller overprices their home at $510,000 just to leave room for negotiation, that house becomes completely invisible.
The algorithm just filters it right out.
Gone. The seller ceases to exist to the exact pool of buyers who are perfectly matched for that home.
Out of sight, out of mind. And for the people with slightly higher budgets who actually do see it, the psychology works against the seller anyway through the anchoring bias.
Yes. When a buyer sees a price that feels unreasonably high, that high number becomes their psychological anchor. Suddenly, they judge every single feature of the house harshly just to justify that cost in their head.
Right, they walk into a perfectly fine kitchen and think, well, for $50,000 more than the house down the street, this kitchen shouldn't just be nice. It should be completely gutted, expanded, and renovated with imported marble.
Exactly. It shifts them from an interested party into a hostile detective desperately looking for a reason to reject the property.
And rival real estate agents understand this psychology perfectly, don't they?
Oh, they actively weaponize it through the comparison trap. A smart buyer's agent will schedule a showing at your overpriced home first. They use your house as the setup.
Wow. So they let their clients walk through, feel underwhelmed by the value, and then immediately drive them to a fairly priced home right around the corner.
Yep. And by comparison, that second home suddenly looks like the deal of the century. You are quite literally helping to sell your competition.
It's like being the overpriced decoy wine on a restaurant menu. You aren't meant to be bought. You're just there to make the second most expensive bottle look like a smart, reasonable choice to the customer. You're just providing context for someone else's transaction.
That is the perfect analogy. And the tragedy is that even if the seller eventually realizes their mistake and drops the price to market value, they run headfirst into the effort justification fallacy.
Okay, unpack the mechanics of that fallacy for me. Why doesn't dropping the price fix the problem?
Because viewing a home requires effort. Think about it. When a buyer takes time out of their day, arranging childcare, leaving work early, dealing with traffic, to visit a home that turns out to be blatantly overpriced, they feel their time was disrespected.
So they take it personally.
They do. That frustration creates a deep, negative emotional association with the property. So 3 weeks later, when the seller finally drops the price to where it should have been all along, that buyer doesn't care. They still associate the house with feeling cheated.
Furthermore, the seller has lost the 14 to 21-day new listing buzz. The property is now a stale listing with a high days on market, which just triggers a herd mentality. Everyone assumes the house is fundamentally defective simply because nobody else has bought it yet.
It's a total death spiral.
Okay, but let's flip the script. We now know exactly how sellers sabotage themselves with amateur photos, desperate listing descriptions, manipulated DOM, and psychological pricing traps.
Wow.
If you, the listener, are scrolling through listings tonight, how do you use this exact knowledge to find a hidden gem? How do we spot the undervalued deals?
First, we have to completely redefine what undervalued actually means. Undervalued does not just mean a cheap asking price.
Because a cheap house might just be a cheap house.
Exactly. Undervalued means the price is significantly below its intrinsic value. You're looking for a low price per square foot relative to the immediate neighborhood, or a property that would generate incredibly strong rental yields compared to its purchase price.
So we are looking for fixable inefficiencies. We want to find the houses suffering from the exact sabotage we just spent the last 15 minutes discussing.
Yes. Houses with a high days on market, terrible HDR photography, blown-out windows, crooked angles, and rooms full of clutter.
Because those surface-level flaws scare off the average retail buyer, which suppresses the price, but they cost absolutely nothing to actually fix once you own the home.
Precisely. You are also looking for highly motivated sellers. This means people dealing with a divorce, a sudden job relocation, or an inherited probate property.
A probate property is essentially a home whose original owner has passed away, right?
Right. Often the heirs live out of state, have no emotional attachment to the physical house, and simply want to liquidate the asset quickly for cash rather than spending months preparing it for a top-dollar retail sale.
Our sources suggest you have to get creative with where you look, too. You can monitor county lists for tax-delinquent properties or pre-foreclosures where the owner is behind on payments but wants to sell before the bank takes it to auction.
And then there are pocket listings.
Pocket listings, what are those?
These are off-market deals shared privately through agent and builder networks before they ever hit the public MLS. But a regular buyer can't just Google a pocket listing. You actually have to network.
You have to take well-connected local real estate brokers to coffee and let them know you are a serious buyer looking for off-market opportunities.
Exactly. It's about building those relationships.
But if we are hunting for fixable inefficiencies, how do we make sure we aren't buying a nightmare?
That is the most critical distinction. You have to know the difference between a fixer-upper and a money pit. Cosmetic flaws, ugly wallpaper, outdated cabinets, bad carpet, peeling paint. Those are great. Those are the inefficiencies you want to buy.
And structural issues.
Structural issues, on the other hand, are the money pits. You need to look out for large, zigzagging cracks in the foundation, water damage or musty smells in the basement, and outdated electrical systems.
Like those old two-prong outlets.
Exactly. If you walk through a house and see old two-prong outlets everywhere, that means the house is ungrounded. You aren't just swapping out a plastic faceplate. You might be looking at tearing open the walls for a whole house electrical rewire.
And that requires massive capital and doesn't necessarily add proportionate resale value. But if you do buy a genuine fixer-upper, the logistics of purchasing it are fundamentally different than buying a turnkey home, aren't they?
Oh, completely. You can use specific renovation loans, like the FHA 203K or the Fannie Mae Homestyle loan. These are absolute game changers for your purchasing power.
How so?
Well, instead of needing a mortgage for the house and a separate high-interest personal loan for the construction, these programs let you borrow against the future appraised value of the home. You roll the estimated costs of the renovations right into your primary 30-year mortgage.
That's incredible. But there have to be risks, right?
Oh, for sure. You must budget an extra 20% on top of your contractor's estimates for the inevitable surprises you will find once you start opening up walls. And the insurance requirements completely change.
Right, because if the house is empty while you renovate, a standard homeowner's policy won't cover you in the event of a fire or vandalism.
Exactly. You need a specific vacant home policy and likely builder's risk insurance to protect the physical structure and the raw materials while it's an active construction site.
And don't you also have to verify the contractor's insurance?
Yes. You have to personally verify the general liability and workers' comp insurance of your contractors. If a roofer falls off your house and they aren't properly insured, that lawsuit can wipe out all the equity you thought you were building.
Yikes. So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, everyone wants a deal, but how do we know we aren't just buying someone else's expensive, unsellable mistake?
The absolute key is separating the distress of the owner from the distress of the property. You want a distressed owner selling a fundamentally sound property.
Okay, so a good house, but a seller who just needs to get out.
Right. To ensure that, you have to stress test your assumptions. Run your financial models conservatively. Assume the renovation will take 2 months longer and cost 20% more than quoted, and assume your future rental income or resale value will be slightly lower than you hope.
And if the math on the deal still makes sense under those stressful conditions, you found a gem.
Exactly. And finally, rely on local experts. A spreadsheet scraper can't tell you about an upcoming zoning change or a planned light rail expansion that the broader market hasn't priced in yet. Local knowledge is what allows you to see the value before it becomes obvious to the algorithm.
That is the matrix vision right there. To summarize our journey today, we've learned how glowing HDR photos and phrases like motivated seller or vacant can actively cost sellers thousands of dollars by shifting buyers into a suspicious mindset.
And we've seen how the days on market metric is manipulated by relisting, and how exposing that true history tanks a home's value.
We've walked through the psychological death spiral of overpricing, how anchoring bias and the effort justification fallacy turn buyers hostile, leaving you as the decoy wine for your competition. And we've learned how to spot genuine real estate deals by hunting for cosmetic, fixable inefficiencies rather than structural money pits, utilizing tools like the FHA 203K loan to maximize purchasing power.
It's a completely different way of looking at real estate.
It really is. So here's a final thought for you to mull over. As technology advances, like that Reddit tool exposing Zillow's buried API data, we are rapidly moving toward a future where every buyer has instant, perfect information about a property's history. But if human psychology, like the anchoring bias and the resentment of wasted effort, continues to heavily influence how we value things, will the concept of a real estate bargain ever truly disappear? Or will our deeply ingrained human quirks ensure the market remains forever imperfect? Think about that the next time you're scrolling through listings.